Ma'am, can we start?
Yes, Gautami.
I'll give a brief introduction. Yeah. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. A warm welcome to each one of you, and thank you so much for joining today's webinar. And I'm sure whoever is in Bangalore must be enjoying the rainy weather. So, this webinar is under the initiative of IESA Startup Mitra. As you all aware, IESA stands for India Electronic Semiconductor Association, and it's an association working closely with the industry, government, academic institutions, and the society to cater the needs for the ESDM ecosystem. So, under the IESA, we have a Startup Mitra initiative to help out the startups, ESDM companies, to avail the benefits from the various departments of the governments, not only necessarily like Karnataka, but even the other states in India. But we started with the Karnataka, and the response from the companies is too good. And just to note, like for today's webinar, we have crossed 450 registrations, so that itself tells the importance about the policy. Right. So today the webinar is all about the KSDM policy. We talk about the Karnataka's ESDM policy and the steps to apply, and about the special incentive schemes that are available for the electronic companies. And to talk about it, we have esteemed speaker from Karnataka department itself, Ms. Parnika Pavanram. It takes an immense pleasure for me to welcome her. I welcome you, ma'am. I'll just take a minute of all of you to introduce about her. It is actually an inspiring journey to know about her. Whoever wants to, all for the youth, especially who wants to be in the system or wants to cater the state, right? So, before she is a graduate specialized in finance and accountancy from Christ University, and she joined the Karnataka Administrative Services in 2000. Before joining the Karnataka Administrative Services, she joined in Goldman Sachs and EdTech company. And she's been a dynamic from then, and now currently posted as an assistant commissioner for Karnataka government, working as a general manager for KIDS department. That's a department of electronics, IT, BT, and SMT. So thank you so much, ma'am, for accepting this request and able to talk about the ESDM policy. I'm pretty sure like every one of you, whoever is present in the webinar, will take a knowledge, a bank of knowledge, I can say, because ma'am has been the dynamic, and she's very been smooth, and then her response is also very quick for any of the asks or talking about the ESDM. So over to you.
2000.
Sorry, ma'am. Sorry, I heard that. I think, yeah, I
4 years
missed that. Yeah,
ago. No
yeah, yeah,
worries, no
yeah.
worries. Yes, so firstly, thank you to IESA for allowing the state to use this platform in order to talk more about what policies and incentives we are offering. And this is a great platform for us to interact with the industry, because most of the time, the challenge with government schemes and programs is that there's a lot of good intent, there's a lot of thought put into it, but what we usually lack is in terms of getting the last mile reach of information to the actual beneficiaries. And programs such as these will actually help us in getting that issue sorted. So if in that context, what we'll be largely discussing today is a very brief overview on the existing ecosystem in the state, followed by information on two of the major policies that the government of Karnataka has currently in action. And we will, so Gautami, can firstly, two questions. One is, are we good to start? And second
Yeah, yeah, ma'am.
is, okay. And
Mm.
second is, how much time do we have for the entire session?
Ma'am, an hours of time. Maybe you can talk 45 minutes over your presentation, and last 15 minutes we can keep it for a Q&A, if
Done.
that suits.
Yeah, so 45 minutes is more than what I require. So I'll try to wrap it up soon enough, and would want to actually take questions more. So if we are good to start, let me just quickly share my screen and we can get started with the conversation.
Sure, ma'am.
Great. So is the screen visible to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Okay. Perfect. All right. So To give a quick overview on the ecosystem that exists in the state, um, some of you may already be familiar with a lot of this information, but this is just a very basic overview of what we have going on. Karnataka, Bangalore, for those of you who don't know, is recognized as the fourth largest technology cluster in the world. And it also has the fourth largest skilled workforce. And as you all may be familiar, there are significant number of institutions and processes that contribute to the skilled talent in the state. And Karnataka and Bangalore especially is very well known for its skilled workforce and the presence of varied, diverse talent pool that is available here. And what really fosters this kind of an ecosystem and acts as a testament to the ecosystem is the presence of 400 out of the Fortune 500 companies have their centers here in Karnataka. There are a lot of firsts that the state has been akin to, and a few of them being first in the total exports across Indian states, first in the number of R&D centers, first in the India Innovation Index. And this, I must say, we have been first, the state has been first in the India Innovation Index for 3 years consecutively now. And we're also first in the installed renewable energy. We are first in aerospace and defense manufacturing, thanks to a lot of the other supporting entities such as HAL, BEL, DRDO, and ISRO. And significant presence in the electronics design ecosystem, which puts Karnataka in the first place yet again. Same goes with biotech and biotech production and exports. It is also the largest chip design hub in the country, with 40% of the national share of the electronics design. And it houses 400 plus global R&D centers, most of the big names you can see on the screen. And 55% of IoT startups are based in Bangalore. It is also a preferred investment destination, and it is home to many manufacturing companies across mobile phones, automotive, medical devices, aerospace, and other allied sectors. And we contribute 10% to India's electronic output and 15% of the national share in electronics exports. This is something which is very unique to Karnataka and which a lot of startups and MSMEs have benefited from, is the ecosystem of centers of excellence, which is a very unique model to Karnataka state. What we do essentially when we say center of excellence is we bring together the government department, academia, industry, as well as startups under one roof for each sector, which is an emerging area of technology. So the state has 15 to 18 such centers of excellence, ranging from sectors such as robotics, artificial intelligence, Internet of Ethical Things, Internet of Things, efficiency augmentation, and SAFAL, which is the most relevant in this context, which is the Semiconductor Fabless Center of Excellence, which is based out of HSR layout and has been doing significantly good work in the space of promoting startups in this domain. We also have what is called as Lahari ESDM testing facility, which is in Mysore, which is a common testing facility available specially for startups and MSME companies in order to take benefit of the common testing facilities, which we understand as a major capital intensive process and a major pain point for a lot of startups and MSMEs that are trying to do testing in this segment. This is again a very interesting and encouraging update for a lot of startups and MSMEs in this domain, which is that there are 4 EMC clusters that are coming up in the state. In fact, Karnataka was the state with the highest number of applications to METI. That the central government, the electronics manufacturing cluster scheme under METI was launched earlier, and Karnataka had the highest number of applications filed, with 4 such sites being proposed. One, which is in Dharwad, Kotur, Belur, has already been approved and it is available for occupation. The one in Mysore, Kochinelli, is in the final stages of approval. There are 2 more which are very strategically located close to Bangalore. One is Tumkur, which is Vasant Narsapura, and the other is in Adinara and Hosahalli, which is very close to the Bangalore International Airport, and very strategically located on the STRR, which was recently inaugurated, close to the logistics park too. So these are very, very significant developments for the ecosystem in the state, in order to actually identify the right kind of land parcels, which is not just well developed with the right kind of infrastructure necessary for an electronics cluster, but are also strategically connected to logistics and other relevant ecosystems. And as I was mentioning earlier, why we're talking about all of this before we actually talk about the incentives, which is why a lot of you are here, is because what incentives a policy or a state gives out is very important, especially when the company is starting off and trying to establish itself in the state. But what will help you sustain and continue to be established in the state in a good shape is what we can provide as a long-term sustenance and support as an ecosystem. And that is where skilled talent, that is where right kind of infrastructure, where the right kind of systemic support, all of these play a major role. And skilled talent is one thing which the state is heavily interested and invested in terms of building a significant amount of talent pool to cater to the needs of this sector. There are existing universities, one of the largest in the country, 52 in number, significant 200 plus engineering colleges, 1,700 plus ITIs. All of these, along with esteemed institutions such as Indian Institute of Management or Indian Institute of Science, or Indian Institute of Technology also, all of these contribute significantly to the availability of skilled talent pool. But having said this, there are also a lot of other initiatives that are coming up in this space, be it in terms of setting up an R&D fab, which can actually support providing skilled workforce for the semiconductor space. There is also a skill council in emerging technology areas, which has been set up under the ambit of the Department of IT/BT, through which we are actually working out a curriculum which is closely in sync with what the industry requires. And we are trying to work closely with industry partners actually to set up these courses and skill individuals. And that curriculum has already been put in place with close consultation with industry. So all of these activities and initiatives are what support us in having the right kind of talent pool across all verticals of business abundantly available in the state. And these are the things which will actually support businesses in continuing in your business in the long run. Having said that, I will quickly jump to the actual topic of our discussion, which is the Karnataka ESDM policy ecosystem. There are two policies which we will be talking about. One is the Karnataka ESDM Special Incentive Scheme and the Karnataka ESDM policy. Why are there two separate ones? What are we trying to achieve? How are they different? We will cover all of that through the course of the next half an hour. And we will briefly touch upon what is the objective of each of these schemes, what is the eligibility, and what are the different fiscal incentives that are available. So we'll first begin with the special incentive scheme under Karnataka ESDM policy. This is actually valid. This is currently active, and this is valid till September 2025. But the state is also in the process of coming out with a updated version of the policy, probably in early 2025 itself. So we are still in the process of working out some of those nuances. But if that happens, then you'll all be recipients of a better and bigger version of the policy much sooner. But for now, this version of the policy is applicable till September 2025. If we have to look at what is the vision of this policy, it is larger vision is, of course, to make Karnataka as the most preferred destination for investments in the electronics ecosystem. While there are close to 40 plus companies that have already expressed interest, and several of them have availed incentives under this scheme. Several of the pipeline cases are currently under evaluation. And in fact, how we operate, which is not a policy mandate, but something that we have worked out for the convenience of the industry, is the minute a company, startup, MSME, large company, irrespective of that, takes interest in any of the policies of the state, we actually work with them with a dedicated SPOC who is assigned from the department. They in turn work with the company to understand the requirement, give them a format in which they should be sending out their proposal. We evaluate the proposal, help to work out the numbers, and then in turn ensure that we handhold you through the process of filing of the application right until the point of final disbursement. So that is an active engagement that the department has with ecosystem stakeholders. And talking about the specifics of what the special incentive scheme has to offer, a very important criteria, three criteria of eligibility are to be noted. One is the investment eligibility, where the policy mandates a minimum investment that a company needs to make to be eligible under this scheme, wherein minimum investment on eligible plant and machinery is to be 15 crore in case of a new unit, and expansion unit. So if you are filing for incentive as an expansion of an existing facility, then the minimum investment has to be 50 crore. While if you are a new unit and you are wanting to apply, then your minimum investment needs to be 15 crore. There is also a mandate on the employment generation that will be, I'm sure IESA will be able to facilitate this. We'll be sending out the operational guidelines of the policy, which is also available on the department website, but we'll send it out separately too. And you'll be able to identify what should be the minimum investment corresponding to your, what should be your minimum employment generation corresponding to your investment according to the OPG. So apart from minimum investment and employment generation, the third category of eligibility, or the third criteria of eligibility, is in terms of what is your actual product, or what is your actual business pertaining to. So we have identified specific sectors such as telecom systems, mobile, information, broadcasting equipment, medical electronics, avionics, industrial electronics, defense and strategic electronics, automotive electronics and consumer electronics, IT systems and hardware. This is apart from what is covered under National Policy of Electronics, where we say that any product that is identified under the National Policy of Electronics, that is either under specs or PLI, will automatically be covered under our policy too. In the semiconductor space, we include PCBs, bare boards, chip components, chemicals for bare boards, in terms of both manufacturing and design. And in the electronic manufacturing services, we also include design or intellectual property software services for electronics products. Solar cells manufacturing and LED is also a key component that is included, be it solar cell modules or LED, and other ESDM related target segments that may get approved on a case-to-case basis. What we mean when we say that is, there is a technical committee that has been put in place that explicitly looks into any kind of gray area when it comes to eligibility. So if you don't fall into any of the categories which are explicitly mentioned here, but you believe that you are still connected to electronics and manufacturing, then you can still apply, and we will place it in front of the technical committee, where experts from the industry are actually part of the committee along with government representatives, who will take a call on whether or not the eligibility can be considered. So these are the three major areas of eligibility which you need to qualify for in order to be eligible for taking any incentive. If we have to look at what are the major incentives, there are 6 incentive components under the special incentive scheme. The first category being the capital incentive subsidy, where there is a 25% of expenditure done on land is reimbursed by the department. But there are a few clauses. One being, land must have been procured anywhere except Bangalore urban and rural districts. And up to 50 acres is the limit, and it is capped at INR 12.5 crore. The second head under capital incentive is that any eligible capital expenditure on plant and machinery is also reimbursed at a percentage of 20%. The second major head after capital incentive is that of reimbursement of stamp duty and registration charges, where 100% reimbursement up to 10 crore for Bangalore urban and rural is allowed. It is a 100% reimbursement. The capping of up to 10 crore is specifically for Bangalore urban and rural, and up to 50 acres for all other districts. When we talk about reimbursement of land conversion fee, there is a 100% reimbursement, again, up to 50 acres land for all districts. So these are the major incentives under capital, stamp duty, and land conversion. Now coming to the operational side of things, operational expenditure bit of things, the first is what we call production linked incentive, where 1% of the annual turnover for a period of 5 years is reimbursed to the company. This actually helps to space out your incentive over a significant period of time, and it is directly linked to whatever output or turnover you're generating. So in turn, if the company does well, the more the benefit you receive. So that is the rationale behind the production linked incentive. The fifth head under incentive components would be that of electricity duty, where 100% exemption from electricity duty is given for a period of 5 years. When it comes to power tariff reimbursement, INR 1 per unit for 5 years is given under the power tariff reimbursement category. So these are the 6 major heads of incentive components which are available to companies who qualify for the eligibility mentioned in the previous slide. So there is one blanket clause where we say that a maximum incentive amount sanctioned to a single company or enterprise under special incentive scheme shall not exceed 100% of the value of fixed asset. So there are, of course, this is a very, very broad overview of the policy that we are giving. There's a lot of detailing that you will require to understand if you are specifically trying to apply, which is where the operational guidelines are extremely important. The operational guidelines have been framed with a lot of effort so that every gray area that could potentially arise could be addressed. And if you look at the OPG, you are almost 95% likely to be able to figure out what should be your incentive just by your own calculations. But if there are any further clarifications required, the department will be more than happy to help you see if the understanding that you have of the incentives are on par with whatever is the intent of the policy. So that calculation and that clarification, department will be happy to provide to any interested entities. So this was about the special incentive scheme. And as I mentioned, this is for a new unit with a minimum investment of 15 crore, expansion unit 50 crore is the minimum investment, which means clearly we are talking about a significantly large amount of investment, may not always be applicable for startups or MSMEs. And that is where the Karnataka ESDM policy comes into picture. Now, this is very significant for especially the audience largely that we have today. While this policy says it is from 2017 to 2022, this has been made coterminous with the special incentive scheme, which means that it is active till September 2025 as well. As I mentioned earlier, department is coming out with a new version of the policy, which will be combining both these policies that we have currently running, and that is expected to be operational by early 2025. So which means that this would also get this will essentially continue under the new version of the policy based on whatever are the clauses and incentives that are given out under the new version. So until then, this policy is active too and most relevant for MSMEs and startups. Again, working on talking about what kind of specifications we're looking at under the Karnataka ESDM policy. So the first criteria here is that there is something called as a registration of ESDM company that will have to be done. This is the first step towards claiming incentive under the Karnataka ESDM policy. It's a very straightforward application where you will file for a registration. The department will verify it. There is a physical inspection that happens to ensure the authenticity of the setup. And once that is verified, the registration certificate is given. All of this process is online, except for the part where the department representatives come in person and visit the facility. Or the certificate is given digitally, the e-signing happens digitally, any registration fee is also payable digitally. So all of that has been made online. The criteria here is that the company has to employ at least 50% of its total workforce in Karnataka, which should not include contract employees. And technically, you should be registered under the Karnataka Shops and Commercial Establishment Act, which you should have already done if you're already operational. So that certificate is made mandatory in order to register as an ESDM company. This is not a substitution of that registration, is what we are trying to convey. There are more than 230 applications which have been received under this policy, and close to 17 crores of disbursement of incentive has happened under this policy. The entire application for incentive is also through online mode, where there's a dedicated portal for filing of these applications. The review happens by the department, and the disbursement in turn happens by direct bank transfer. The application, though, is fully online in a single platform. Here too, there are certain specifications of eligibility. So the company should be registered in Karnataka, number one, and there has to be a registration under the Karnataka Shops and Commercial Establishment Act. There is a one-time charge of INR 10,000 for KESDM registration, which is exclusive of the applicable GST for the registration under the KESDM policy. Apart from this, there is employment generation criteria where we, as I mentioned earlier, 50% of the workforce has to be in Karnataka, and it should not include, and that 50% number should not include contractual employees. When we talk about the product categories which are eligible under the KESDM policy, we have covered most of what we already mentioned earlier. Telecom systems, mobiles, information and broadcasting equipment, medical electronics, avionics, industrial electronics, defense and strategic electronics, automotive electronics, consumer electronics, IT systems and hardware. And under semiconductor, chip component, ICs and components, PCBs, all of that is included. Design, IP, software services for electronic products are covered. Electronic manufacturing services are covered. Any other electronics verticals or products covered by the National Policy on Electronics, National Manufacturing Policy, and related notifications as issued by the Government of India from time to time are all automatically included for eligibility under the Karnataka ESDM policy as well. Now, if we have to look at what are the incentives that are available for companies under KESDM policy, first, I would like to draw your attention to the categorization of companies, where we categorize companies based on the investment on fixed asset, where if that is less than 10 crore, you qualify as a startup or MSME. And if it is anywhere between 10 crore to 250 crore, you qualify as a large enterprise. And if it is beyond 250 crore, you qualify as a mega enterprise. And there is also a value addition for local procurement that is required, where a minimum percentage of value addition is also taken into account. And how we calculate this percentage of value addition is through the BOM sourced from local suppliers divided by the total BOM into 100. That is the essential basic percentage calculation which is done. And 25% for year 1, 30% for year 2, 35 for year 3, 40 for year 4, 45 for year 5. So first was the categorization of companies. Second was the value addition for local procurement. Now coming to the list of incentives which are available under the KESDM policy, we have patent registration incentive. In fact, this is one of the most sought after incentives where we receive maximum number of applications. where any patent that you have filed for either for any technology, you can actually claim for whatever cost you've incurred for that process. This is both available for startups and MSMEs as well as large and medium enterprises. When we talk about international marketing incentive, what we essentially cover is if you are participating in any international event, exhibition, expo, where you're taking a stall space, where the business is putting up a dedicated stall, you're registering as a delegate. There is some travel cost involved to and fro. There's some accommodation cost involved. So all of these expenses are considered, and based on the operational guidelines, you are allowed to a certain amount of incentive, which is both available for, again, startups, MSMEs, as well as large and medium enterprises. There is also an R&D grant. R&D grant essentially is for any cost incurred in the process of R&D for your business. There is also a grant available for capital subsidy, but this again is only for large and medium enterprises, not for startups and MSMEs. Reimbursement of quality certification cost. Any cost that you've incurred in the process of availing quality certification, either domestic or international, is subject to reimbursement. This is again available for both startups, not available for large and medium enterprises. It is available for startups and MSMEs. There is also a reimbursement of prototyping cost, where we reimburse any cost that you've incurred towards developing a prototype. There is, of course, some basic mandates are listed out in the operational guidelines on what qualifies as a prototype, how much of a significant deviation should it have been from a previous version for it to qualify for incentive under this version. So there is also a mandate on how many times you can apply for in a given year. All of those are mentioned in the operational guidelines. I will not go into the details because it will become too much information all at once. But reimbursement of prototyping cost is available for startups and MSMEs, but not for large and medium enterprises. Interest subsidy, again, available for startups and MSMEs, not for large and medium enterprises. PF and ESI incentive for any cost that you're incurring here, available to startups and MSMEs, not to large and medium enterprises. Exemption from stamp duty, again, is available to both startups as well as MSMEs, as well as large and medium enterprises. Reimbursement of land conversion fee, available to all. Concessional registration charges, so where there's a concession on the total registration charges incurred, again, available to all. Power tariff concession, available to all, and subsidy for setting up ETP is also available to all categories of industries. So I will let this slide stay on for another couple of seconds so that you can probably sink in, let the list of incentives sink in, and we can then move on to the next slide. Right. So this is all that we have from our end. Largely to summarize what we've been discussing, Karnataka is a very active state when it comes to electronics and semiconductor ecosystem. There's a lot of activity going on. State is very, very focused on building this ecosystem and supporting it in a big way. We're actively reaching out to international partners. We're actively looking out for investments. We're actively building the ecosystem from bottom up, either in terms of skilling or in terms of giving the right kind of infrastructure, ensuring that the process of registration, setting up, and everything is smooth. Skilling and workforce empowerment is something which is focused on in a big way. And the two major schemes that the state is talking about, one being special incentive scheme for slightly larger entities, and the KESDM policy for startups and MSMEs majorly are all is all the information that we have covered. Largely under KESDM policy, there is a specific registration that needs to be done first in order to apply for any of the incentives, post which the incentive application itself will be processed, and the same will be the whole process is largely online, and we'll also be having a dedicated point of contact for you who can help you in understanding what is your eligibility looking like, what is your incentive looking like, what is your best policy to apply under. So this is largely what the department is doing on this front. And as I mentioned, we're also actively seeking inputs from the larger ecosystem on what we should be having as major incentives or inputs for the policy that we're going to be announcing in the next year. And any inputs on the same, we'll be happy to take for our policy. Meanwhile, in case of, I see that quite a few of you have started listing out some of the questions in the chat. Let me also put out the email ID on which you can share any questions. In case of any further collaboration or inputs or assistance required, the email ID that I've just put out in the chat box would be the place to, would be the right email ID to access. Meanwhile, now we can actually look at specific questions. Gautami, do we
Yeah,
have
ma'am.
anything else planned
So
apart
there
from?
are, yes, so there are questions. One is 50% labor force from Karnataka to be maintained for how long?
Sorry, 50%?
Of the workforce from Karnataka should be maintained for how long? They're asking for the time period.
Yeah, so we usually check for eligibility at the time of application. And because all of these incentives are largely one-time incentives, so we look at that eligibility at the time of your application, and if that is true, then you're through. If you want to apply again in future, then you'll have to maintain that 50%.
Okay. The other question is from Preeti. Don't we need any registration for special incentive scheme? I didn't understand the
We
question. Yeah.
I know, I understood. So there isn't a separate registration required for special incentive scheme because what we usually do is we send out a detailed format of expression of interest, what we call, for which you will have to fill out. It's a pretty elaborate format where all the detailing of your investment, what breakup your get the breakup of the investment, and what are your timelines looking like, what is your estimated turnover, all of that is taken down. Based on that, we work with you on arriving at a figure of incentive. So there is no separate registration as such that is required for special incentive scheme. There is a
But the
fee that
application is required.
application is required. There is
Mm,
a
mm,
fee that
mm.
is collected at the time of filing the application for the incentive directly. There is no separate registration process or fee for special incentive scheme.
So, ma'am, to apply or to fill the application, should they reach out directly to the office or is there any online portal available for that as well?
So for special incentive scheme, it is best to write to the department directly because it is a slightly more complex structure of incentives, and we will have to sit across the table and figure out the numbers. But
Mm.
the application portal is anyway open all through the year. You can, if you are clear with the application, you can go ahead and file for the documentation directly. It is ideal if you have a conversation first, simply because you will also be fully clear on what you're doing and what are the next steps.
Right, right. So the other question is, do startups having units in rented premises eligible for power tariff concessions?
Do startups have a
Having units in rented premises eligible for power tariff concessions.
okay rented premises power tariff concession? It is available. I mean, it is, you're eligible, subject to whether there's a separate meter and all of those specifications will exist, but there is no mandate that you have to be in a owned facility.
Okay. Is there any government portal for registration? Yes, there is a KESDM portal itself. I think
Yeah, I
I
think
can
what we
guide
can
that.
do, Gautami, if you can send out the
Yeah,
link to the website also in the chat.
yeah, yeah. We
We
have
could,
also incorporated that link in our webpage as well. So
okay,
I'll post both of it. Yeah.
right.
And for startup, can the company be started in a garage with 2 or 3 persons?
Yeah. There's no mandate on where you start or how
Where
you. There's of course, if you want to be eligible for incentive, there are those specifications of how much of investment should have gone in. So as long as
Mhm.
your books of accounts can show that kind of numbers, it doesn't matter where you're operating out of.
Madam, for startup case, any requirement and number of employees? Vishnu is asking this question.
So there isn't a minimum number of for special incentive scheme. There is a minimum employment criteria, but under KESDM policy, the only criteria is that 50% of your workforce has to be located in Karnataka. We're not even saying from Karnataka; it has to be working in Karnataka. In a sense, a lot
Can
of
we
these
have a
companies have units across the country, and majority of the workforce would actually be working out of, let's say, a manufacturing unit in another state. So then they cannot claim, or they will not be eligible unless 50% of their total workforce is actually working out of their Karnataka unit.
okay? Can we have an SPV with kits for deep tech hardware industry in special purpose vehicle?
SPV with kits
SPV.
for the deep tech hardware industry depends on what you want to achieve through the SPV. What is it that is required will have to be explored further before we arrive at a conclusive answer to that. I mean, there's nothing legally stopping us from getting into SPVs with anybody, but why we're doing it, is it needed? Is it justified enough for the government to be getting involved in it? All of these questions will have to be answered.
Right. Any incentive or pre-approval for getting KIDB or industrial areas?
Any incentive for, could you please repeat?
Any incentive or pre-approval for getting KIDB or industrial areas? I think they're asking about KIDB incentive.
So KIDB land, you will be able to apply and get an allotment provided you qualify for it. But there isn't any separate incentive. If you're getting land, anyway, your land cost, whatever you're paying, will be eligible for incentive under the policy as we mentioned. But there isn't a separate incentive specifically if you're taking up KIDB land or anything of that sort.
There's a one question, value addition requirement is not feasible when most of raw materials are imported. Can you clarify this further?
That is true. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah.
So we understand the challenges that because this sector, the raw materials are heavily import dependent. We understand that. So what we can do in that case is you can go ahead and file the application, or you can go ahead and start the discussion with the department. We will be in a better position to explain how to work it out and figure it out on a case to case basis.
Yeah. Venkatesh is saying thank you for a great pitch. These schemes were not known to us. We are a startup. If we file for reimbursements and patent expense refunds, how long will the process take?
Really couldn't hear you. Can you tell me which question you're looking at so that I can probably read it out myself?
Venkatesh Vadema. So he's telling that thank you for a great pitch. These schemes were not known to us. We are a startup. If we file for reimbursements and patent expense refunds, how long will the process take?
Okay, so if we file for reimbursements and patent expense refunds, how long will the process take? Okay,
Yeah.
so right now, registration of the company is a Sakala mandated process, which means that there is a specific deadline. Usually, registration is ensured and delivered within 1 month, latest 45 days. That is the process. That is the time duration for the registration process. Post
Hmm.
which the actual application and incentive we try to close within 2 months, maximum 3 months. It has taken longer in the past, but we have worked out better processes and checklists. Usually, where it would consume a lot of time is some of the documents that the company would have submitted would have been partially complete, or would have not been authorized by the correct chartered accountant signatures, and other things would not be in place. So in instances such as those, we will have to write to you and there would be a lot of back and forth, which has led to a few delays in the past. But now we have actually come out with a detailed checklist for each of these incentives, which will give you a clear list of documents that need to be submitted and a few specific conditions that you need to adhere to, like chartered accountant signature, audited financials. So we have mandated what these conditions are. So once we receive an application for a particular incentive, we immediately send out this list of documents saying, please ensure that you've submitted all of these. We collect the same, we review it once and for all, and at least you get an immediate yes or no as an answer without having to wait on it for too long. So that has been fast tracked significantly in the last couple of months. And we are positive that in a span of 1 month to 3 months latest, we will be in a position to disburse the incentive.
And there are questions around the mandatory documents and then how do they apply and everything. I think the link will showcase the all the eligibility criteria and everything. Probably I'll put out that link.
Yes.
And is there a time bound dispersal of incentives? If so, what are they like within a quarter is what's needed?
Again, which question, if you can indicate, that would help.
I think they have written a direct message to me. So there is a question that is there a time bound disposal of incentives? If so, what are they like? Within a quarter is what's needed.
Yeah. So I think I just answered that question.
Yeah.
Under KESDM policy specifically, registration 1 month to 45 days maximum. Application of incentive from that date of application of for the incentive, we take a minimum of 1 month, maximum of 3 months, and we try to close it. So essentially, that's 1 quarter.
Yeah. I'm also like, whenever they are getting the receiving the certificate that they have registered under KSDM, is there a specific timeline? For example, a company is getting registered this month. So last year they might have gone for some international conference. Can they apply for the next month? Are they eligible to give those documents, for a marketing incentive?
There is a mandate to have applied within 6 months of the actual travel or the actual event. And of course, some basic conditions that if let's say the event is today, and if you've traveled 2-3 weeks beforehand and you're traveling back 2-3 weeks after, some of these will not be considered. These are all exceptions, but as a norm, if you've attended the event today, within the next 6 months, if you can make an application for it, that will work.
Right. Karnataka is the better for ESDM companies compared to incentives and governance. Can we get a comparison like that?
So let me know if I've understood this right. Compared to incentives and governance, can we get comparison like that? As in, are you trying to ask for a comparison between Karnataka state and other states when it comes to incentives?
Yes.
Okay. So largely from our analysis again, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu are amongst two of the most cost-effective states when it comes to operations. If you look at pure incentive numbers, of course, a lot of the emerging ecosystems like Odisha usually offer tough competition. But when you look at it from a more holistic point of view, of where you already have an ecosystem, where you already have suppliers, where you already have access to the right kind of skilled talent, when you factor in all of these things along with availability of allied infrastructure like logistics, access to international airport, access to road transport, all of this factored in, Karnataka and very close second, I would say, would be Tamil Nadu in this regard.
Right. Can we avail both KIDB incentives and special incentives?
What would you mean when you say KIDB incentive? I'm not sure.
I think Vijay Kumar, he has asked a question.
Hi, ma'am. This is Vijay. The KIDB, they have zonal incentives for the land, and those incentives and special incentives of ESDM. Can we avail those both?
Yeah. So if you're talking about the industrial policy, then no, we will either have to apply under that or under this. Both will not be eligible. if you're talking about allotment of land alone, that you can still take land and apply for special incentive. There's nothing stopping you from that.
Okay, understood.
And yeah, Gautami, we can continue.
There is a question. We are registered in the Karnataka ESDM in 2020, but were told there was no funds for disbursement. Is the government in a position now to disburse funds for eligible companies?
So right now, fingers crossed, we are having significant amount of allocation. In fact, we are trying to fulfill our expenditure targets right now. So we are good to go till as long as the policy is active. So no worries there.
Okay. As per the operational guidelines for the policy 2017-22, R&D grant is available twice during policy period and max up to 7 years of incorporation. Since the policy is extended till now, has the number of applications limit increased?
So no, the limit will remain the same. Even though the policy period itself has got extended, the number of times a particular entity can apply still remains the same.
And there's a question from Ganesh. Can we have a similar session for biotech startups on latest biotech policy?
We will do it. We'll do it. I don't know if IESA would be the right person to facilitate it, but we will do it. We are just waiting for the official announcement of the biotech policy to come out so that we can spread the word in the similar manner.
Okay. I think Arjun is asking that, is it mandatory to register the startup in Karnataka for eligibility under special incentive scheme, or can we register the company in some other states and more than 50% workforce in Karnataka? I don't think that's possible.
No,
right now.
registration is
Has to be
mandatory.
registered.
The reason being, the state funds cannot be spent on anything which is not directly a state entity. So for that, you need to be registered within the state. Otherwise, we will not be an eligible beneficiary for any scheme in any department in the government.
Right. Prototype of avionics product orders already received from defense public sector establishment, and prototyping is already in progress. Kindly spell out the eligibility.
Okay. Prototyping cost, if we have to talk about eligibility for prototyping cost, we look at various heads of expenditure that have been incurred. Just give me a minute, I will read out the exact clauses. We can actually go to the next question and probably, no, okay, got it. Yeah, so reimbursement of prototyping cost, it is, again, applicability is the same. The KSDM startup or MSME, they have to be registered firstly, and it will be, the entity will be eligible for a reimbursement of 50% of the cost incurred for developing a prototype of a product. And this will be subject to an upper limit of 10 lakhs per year, with an allowance of a maximum of 2 sanctions per year per company. And of course, there are a specific set of documents that are required that you can refer the OPG. I will not get into the details of that. To repeat, 50% of the cost incurred, you will be eligible. This will be subject to an upper limit of 10 lakh per year, with an allowance of a maximum of 2 sanctions per year per company.
So, thank you, ma'am. And for international marketing incentive, is it applicable only for travel for a conference or event? Can we apply for general business development travel?
General business development travel is not eligible as far as I know. It is only for specific events participation where business has, so if I have to be very specific, companies as credible players will be reimbursement 50% of actual cost. Registration, economy class travel, boarding and lodging expenses for international marketing events and conferences, trade show participation, and exhibition stall rentals. These are what are covered.
And the definition.
Just to add on, reimbursement for travel expenses, food and lodging will be capped at 2 employees for participation in up to 2 international events, conferences, trade shows per company per year. DA will include the lodging, food and intracity commute, and journey days will not be considered for computing TA.
Right. I think here, even for women employees, the preference will be
Preference
given
for
in this, right?
reimbursement will be given to women members, and travel reimbursement will only be applicable on economy air travel and DA up to $100 a day for international travel.
Right. MSME definition is different from MSME ministry. Why so?
SME definition, what we try usually is, while you will be getting a certain amount of incentives under MSME policy or industrial policy, when we make sector specific policies, we try to be more uh, careful about what that particular sector needs in that startup or MSME category. Hence, we usually change the definitions of what each of these considerations mean slightly in order to make it more conducive to the requirements within, let's say, electronic subsector. So that is usually the reason why there's a minor change that is done.
Right. So I think that's about it, ma'am. They're asking for links to access the details of presented in the session. We will
There
be
was
posting.
somebody who was asking for an R&D grant clarification 1 or 2 times. They have asked, as per OPG, R&D grant is available twice. So
That's 7 years, ma'am. You answered that.
yeah, okay. Then good.
And there is a repeated question, that is power tariff concession available to service companies having a rented office setup and commercial meter.
Should be available. So you're saying there is a separate meter, commercial
Commercial meter, not industrial.
Correct. So what we mean when we say power tariff concession is, if you have a commercial power tariff, then we will write to the concerned department and get you categorized under industrial power tariff instead. So automatically industrial power tariff rates will become applicable for you, even though you are currently having a commercial unit.
Right. So there is one more thing, that policies can be more tax friendly. Most of support is taxable directly or indirectly under Income Tax Act.
So how can we make our incentives tax friendly? Is the question. So we understand that GST is not included in any of our reimbursements or claims that we give. Any suggestions on how we can make it more conducive to what you're asking? We'll be happy to hear on the same.
I think Pritesh has pointed out this.
Okay. So please feel free to write to the ID
Right.
that I stated here. It's the right time to be sharing your input so that we can actually see if there is something that we can include in the next version of the policy which can help resolve these issues.
There's one more question, ma'am. We are DIPP registered startup. Do we still need to register under ESDM to apply for these incentives?
Yes.
Yes.
Separate registration is mandatory for KESDM policy incentives.
Yeah. I think, we will end the Q&A. I think there are no more questions. So, is this schemes are applicable for proprietor firms? That's the last question.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that stops us from, if it's a sole proprietorship, there's no issue. As long as you are fulfilling the other eligibility criteria, that you should be registered in shops and establishment, you should be registered in the KESDM portal, all of that. If that is fulfilled, then rest is okay. No issues.
Can a Karnataka company working on a central government part funded part of Bharat?
They can take incentives under IESA. There's nothing that is stopping you from claiming incentives in Karnataka if you've claimed incentives in Government of India. Only if you've claimed incentives in other policies in Karnataka, only then there's a restriction to also apply here. Basically, you can't be a double beneficiary of incentive in the state. You can be incentivized at the center and also get incentivized here. That is not a problem.
Right, ma'am. I think this was a great and an insightful session. And I think this session was a due from past March right?
Yeah.
So finally we were able to do it, and I'm sure like everybody would have got some knowledge. And most of the startups and the companies were not aware about this policy. Though when we started about this, encouraging the companies to apply for it, also we got to know that they were not aware. So the awareness is a key for the policies. So that's what I believe in, and it was a great session, ma'am, and it was a clear-cut picture that's, even for a person who doesn't know anything about the policy, they got a idea. And thank you so much, ma'am. And for all the participants who joined also, thank you so much for your time. So keep waiting for more sessions on this from, IESA Startup Mitra program. And ma'am is, as I told, like she's dynamic and she's been very smooth in working. So write to her for any of the queries and even for any other collaborations as well. Thank you so much, ma'am.
So just one last thing, we'll of course be reaching out through IESA to all of you in the near future to draw policy inputs. And once we have a draft policy in place, we'll probably be doing more stakeholder consultations. Most likely, we'll also put it up on our social media handles of Department of ITBT, Government of Karnataka. So I request all of you to actually follow the social media handles, because that is the best source of understanding any new initiatives. In fact, startup policy of Karnataka is very, very encouraging and very beneficial to a lot of the startups. And as long as you're not taking the same incentive there, and here there is nothing that is stopping you from participating in, let's say, an Elevate program or benefiting from the Kitwin fund. So we encourage you to follow the social media handles, because that is the easiest way to get to know what is happening and what are the different benefits to be availed from the state. And we hope to continue working with all of you to draw inputs and to get your thoughts on how we should be framing our policies. We'll be doing that more in the future. I request Gautami, please share the registration link and the social media handles of the department, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all of that with the team.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Sure. Definitely, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.